Another very important concept in Visual Basic programming is using loops. So if we need to perform the same task, so we need to repeat same piece of code multiple times, it can be done using one of the Visual Basic loops. Loops are like indispensable part of any programming language, one of the most powerful programming technique, and of course possible to use in Visual Basic Editor, and there are several type of loops. One we like already reviewed, with and with loop. So an important structure to work with collections of objects, right? To repeat the same or similar piece of code for collection of objects, for example, for values in a given range, in a given array. And first example is with statement. We can go to again documentation of Visual Basic Editor, and in language references for Visual Basic and for concepts in Visual Basic, we can find different type of loops and information how to use them in practice with some examples. We start with loop, but we will be also interested, we are interested in for each next statement, for next statement. Also do loop would be useful for certain algorithms, and each description for each of this concept can be found in documentation. Let's start with if. So the with statement lets you specify an object or user-defined tab. We will focus on available objects once for entire series of statements. So with statements make your procedure run faster and help you avoid repetitive typing, right? This is the key here. And this is syntax. So we start the with, we use our object and collection of objects, and for each collection inside this object that is composed of the individual objects that we want to use. Like if you remember about the scalar head of objects, we have this master or this host object worksheets, and the worksheets is composed of ranges, right? So for each range in worksheet we will do something similar. So we will repeat the part of the code with this with statement. And an example that we have here is based on just formatting text. So we have a computational finance, and we have subroutine that changes the font for the desired font, changes formatting. So for this selection, we want to work with the font, and we want to change the name of the font to Arial. We want the font to be bolded, in italic, underlined. We want to change the size to 16 from current 11, and we want to change the color, use the RGB palette. So mainly focus on the red color here. So take a look how it works. So I will press F8 to execute each line here. So first I check to change it to Arial, then I make it bold and italic. I want to underline, increase the size and change the color, and this is how it works. Okay, so I will go back to previous formatting, and now instead of writing selection font in each of the line you want to manipulate with some characteristic, you can just write with, then this collection of objects. So in selection in this font you want to change, and we have a collection of properties that we can manipulate with. So again, I use F8 button and it will work in the same way, but I'll start with, I assign this selection font and then I will do something with this selection font. Now I have different font name. Again, F5, the same result as here, right? But with less repetition in this selection font part. So this is for a loop, very often used for this formatting. Next loop here that helps us to work with collections of objects is for each loop. So take a look into the documentation. We have for each next statement, right? So it will repeat a block of statements for each object and collection or each element in array, like again array in with the price to earnings ratio for number of companies, right? So Visual Basic, this is important, Visual Basic will automatically set a variable each time the loop runs, right? And we have an example. The following procedure closes all forms except the form containing the procedure that's running. So if I have subroutine close forms for each form in application forms, and if form caption is different than the one on the screen of active caption, then we will close the form, right? Or maybe in easier one, we have a test array that contains 10 values, and we want for each value inside this array to assign its value to this I. Also, in our example here, we have for each statement, and collection now is active workbook. So we have one active workbook, and the workbook is composed of worksheets, as we know from the beginning of our work with Visual Basic, right? So workbooks, worksheets, ranges, charts, scenarios are all Excel objects, and their common collections. They are arranged in hierarchies, different properties, and some methods, right? So we have a collection of worksheets in our active workbook, and what we want to do now is we want to use count variable. The count variable is defined at the beginning. We will continue with data types in different videos, but now we will just assume that this count at the beginning would be equal to 0 because we do not provide any other value. And for each worksheet in our active workbook, we will increase the count by 1. So each time the loop goes through our worksheets collection, the count variable will increase by 1. So now if I will execute the code with F8 button, in my locals window I have a count variable now equal to 0. I will start the loop. So I'm about to start the loop. I press F8. What do I have? I have now Outlook 2016 for some reason. Yeah, this is Microsoft Excel. Okay, so let me clear this. I have count equal to 0, and then if I use F8 button, I move to the second loop, second part of the loop for my next worksheet in my collection, and I'm getting back again here. Now let's take a look. Count is equal to 1. In the second step of my loop, right? So I have some variable that is used to run through collection of objects, and until I have some worksheets in my active workbook, I will run the code. So in this case, I have 1, 2, 3, 4 worksheets here. So I will run the loop 4 times, and each time my initial count will be equal to count plus 1. So if you see a similar piece of code for the first time, it looks like weird, but this equal sign here, it doesn't mean that this is equal sign in Visual Basic and other programming languages, of course depending on the syntax, means that we want to assign the value. So we want to assign a new value to the count, and this new value would be equal to the previous plus 1. So we'll increment the value. So assign a new higher by 1. So again, I press F8 button, and now my count is equal to 2 because previously it was equal to 1, and I increase it by 1. And next step, and count is equal to 3, and count is equal to 4, and I run out of worksheets in my collection. And now I have a message box, also the one that we used for hello world introduction, and I want to run a message box with a text there are, and I join this text with count variable, its count is equal to 4, and again I will join this with a worksheet in a workbook. So now if I press F8 button, I have there are 4 worksheets in this workbook, and that's it. And that's it. And also I have other examples of for each. Let's do one more here. For each, right? So I have for each something in selection. Something in selection. So so how does it work? So if I have a selection, the selection is like a range in Microsoft Excel. It's a collection of individual cells. So if I use for each statement, I will use the objects that builds my selection. So I will use individual cells. I assign CL a variable. The name is of course up to you. I use CL. It works as cells. And what I want to do, I want this cell to be equal to active sheet name. Again, I have 4 worksheets, and my active sheet name currently is Logic VBA. So I will assign a Logic VBA value to my CL in my selection. So if I select a few cells here, I will use this Logic VBA for each of the cell, and this is my first loop, and in my second loop I will use uCase C value. What is uCase? uCase is a built-in function in Visual Basic that will do or change the letters to their uppercase. So take a look how it works. I press F8, and now I need to repeat. I write Logic VBA for each cell in my selection. Right, there are 4 cells in my selection, so I was like done with this this first loop after all the cells are filled with the name of my active sheet. I will get my message box that the first step is done, and next, for each cell in selection, the selection stays the same. I will use uppercase function, so I will change it to uppercase, and that's it. Right, another example for each loop.